Yo guys, I've got a spark which I'm going to use to ignite the fire for a brand new Skylanders video here on the channel. Skylanders in the background and everything, so we can have Skylanders here, there, just about everywhere, because it wouldn't be a Skylanders video without Skylanders now, would it? Regardless, I did a video not all that long ago about what each How to Train Your Dragon film does best, which is why I've had How to Train Your Dragon watermark down there for the longest time, because I've taken a concept I applied to the How to Train Your Dragon films and applying it instead to Skylanders. So without further ado, let's get that out of here. You know, I know this idea originated with How to Train Your Dragon, but now since it's Skylanders themed, it's time to bring in my more traditional watermark as we talk about what each Skylander game does best. So yes, there are 6 mainline console games. You know, if I were to say what the 3DS games do best, then I rope them all together, and I would say platforming, just because the 3DS games have such tight, precise and fast-paced platforming. It's easily the best platforming we've seen from the entirety of the Skylanders franchise, purely because that's the purpose of those 3DS games, to provide that spin-off style for Skylanders, and with them being on the 3DS, a less powerful system in comparison to other home consoles, it just made sense for them to tailor the experience to a traditional platformer as to what you'd see quite regularly on the 3DS actually. So yes, they've made quite great games indeed, and that is of course excluding Superchargers Racing on 3DS, which, get that out of here, just pretend it don't exist. Overway now, of all of that being pre-established, let's look at what each of the 6 mainline console Skylanders games do best. So starting off with Skylanders Spyro Adventure, of course released back in 2011, almost 10 years ago. I could take the easy route with this and simply say that Skylanders Spyro Adventure was the best at introducing us not only to this franchise, but an entire new marketing ploy for the gaming franchise, and setting trends for other series to follow, with the Toys to Life genre having been popularised by Skylanders Spyro Adventure. But I'm not going to take a route as easy as that, because instead I'm going to tell you guys about why Spyro Adventure has the greatest interactivity of any Skylanders game. It simply has to do with how the game is designed and how it takes full advantage of these back here, the Skylanders, because we can take the best Skylander ever created and place him on the portal, so he's transferred from our world to his. It's like he's got a life force trapped inside this toy, and it can't be brought out and sent to his world without the power of the portals of which we helm and take control over as a portal master. The entire story and gameplay design and mechanics of said gameplay design is all built up to make you as the player feel immersed and in constant interactivity with the world around you, because you're constantly referred to as the Portal Master, giving you that power and control. So ultimately, just the constant fourth wall breaks and the entirety of the game being designed around this premise, because you can find collectibles dedicated to acknowledging you and your power as the Portal Master. You know, these story scrolls scattered throughout the entirety of the game talk about previous Portal Masters and their roles in this universe, and so ultimately with how this game makes you feel included with this universe, the interactivity, since you're constantly encouraged, that was the word I was looking for, you're constantly encouraged to swap out your Skylanders, so that then you have elemental advantages in certain areas, or can tackle certain elemental gates in order to find additional treasures and all sorts. You know, there's even areas where you don't need to go to an elemental gate, but in the Archean Armory you need to swap out for an Earth Skylander in order to break down some rocks to acquire a legendary treasure. So that level of interactivity and the concept of you taking a toy with a life force trapped inside, being able to place it on a portal and transport that into a gaming world, is that of a really interactive type gimmick that Skylanders Spyro's Adventure takes the most full advantage of, because later Skylanders games refers to you as the Skylander. There is far less Portal Master terminology in the later games, so overall you feel far less immersed in later game stories because they aren't as simple as this game. This game simply took the story as you interact with these toys and place them on the portal. That was all what Spyro's Adventure needed for a story, and its simpleness is what gave it its charm, and it's how Spyro's Adventure became the greatest Skylanders game for interactivity. But moving on from there, we have Giants, which I struggled with at first, but ultimately I was going to give this to a different game, but after having listened to the Skylanders Giants soundtrack on loop, as well as being encouraged by other SkyTubers who are a huge fan of this game, I have come to learn and respect how incredible the Skylanders Giants original soundtrack actually is. Yeah, that's alright. After long, thought-provoking nights, I finally decided that what I think Giants does best is the music. Just listen to what is in the background and you can't tell me otherwise that there is a Skylanders game that does music better than this. Skylanders Giants captures such atmosphere, charm and energy. It makes all of the inclusions, it makes all of the locations even that you're in and feel all the more tangible, and it makes you feel as though everything in the game is surrounding you in real life, so you can truly just take a deep breath and take everything in. You know, it adds to the beauty of the game by giving you more of an atmospheric feel to each level, as each soundtrack feels fitting and appropriate for the location you're in. And overall, the Skylanders Giants soundtrack, as composed by Lorne Balfe, is original. It fits in with the world and adds further atmosphere and tension to the levels to ultimately give you a grand feeling of emotion and immersion in this world. Not to the same level as Spyro's Adventure, because as I've said already, Spyro's Adventure absolutely nails the interactivity because they use interactivity as their main story point, premise, and design the entire game around that. Giants isn't nearly as strong as Spyro's Adventure in that category, however, it does have a huge elevation in terms of the quality of the music. Judas, I hope you're happy, but moving on from the SkyTuber shoutouts, we get to Swap Force, which in my personal opinion is the best Skylanders game for content. Now, I've said again and again that Swap Force does have a large focus on quantity, but that doesn't necessarily sacrifice for quality, because the content in Swap Force for the most part is phenomenal. When it comes to some of the post-game options, you have score mode and time attack, which are pretty lazy because it's the same levels, just going through them to get a high score or to get a fastest time. But the argument here is that those are modes that didn't need to be included, and yet they included them anyway so that you have something additional to do. On top of that, Swap Force also has PvP. It was the last game to do so, but it's the game that does it best, as it has the greatest variety of modes, the best, most balanced cast of characters to utilise, like seriously swapping a Skylander from the Swap Force cast and taking them into PvP is a really fun concept and takes full advantage of the gimmick of the game. I was very close to giving this the interactivity marker rather than Spyro's Adventure, because Swap Force allows you to swap around your characters, and after you've done so you can place them on the portal, creating one of 256 different combinations. And just like Spyro's Adventure, that manipulation of the toys is encouraged. But ultimately, whilst you do interact with the toys, you don't necessarily interact with the world to the same extent as you do in Spyro's Adventure, again because you're not acknowledged as the Portal Master as frequently as you are in Spyro's Adventure. But moving back to the content of which Swap Force has, even in the levels themselves, they have a sheer abundance of collectibles to find and mini games as well. You know, you have the swap zones, which sure they are the exact same design with different objectives after you complete a swap zone, so you're practically doing the same thing twice in a row. But it's still content that they didn't need to include. They could have just said, hey, here's the swap zones and the main levels, and you get a hat for doing it or whatever. But instead they gave you that additional mode on top of everything, and the game is oozing with creativity from its content because there's additional bonus maps and arenas for you to tackle, which all have creative premises and ideas thrown about. So it's actually amazing how much detail they put outside of the main game to make for the greatest, most well-rounded content of the entirety of the Skylanders franchise, because there isn't another Skylanders game where you're going to find as much variety and quality in content as with Swap Force. You get hours of fun from that game, and that is incredible. By far what Swap Force does the best of any Skylanders game. But moving on to Trap Team, my personal favourite game, there are multiple areas where Trap Team thrives. First of all, of the boss fights. It easily has the best boss fights because that's the entire premise of the game. You are effectively a bounty hunter, so that's why so much was poured into the boss fight, so much attention and thought. But ultimately, whilst the boss fights on Trap Team most certainly are the best, with them having the most creative attack patterns to dodge and the greatest setups and the best difficulties, ultimately what I think Trap Team does even better than that is for level design. So yes, what I think Trap Team does best in the entirety of the Skylanders franchise is level design, purely because these levels are creative and they are fun and functional. Even with all of the crazy glitches that Trap Team is known for, these levels function really, really well and are a great way of guiding the player, because as a game designer it's very hard for you to gauge how a player will interact with a certain scenario, and Trap Team has that kind of future insight to it. It knows how you're going to play these levels by guiding you with arrows, bounce pads, all of that jazz, and it makes the levels very well designed and also really creative in terms of their concepts. Like, sure, you have the typical desert theme stages, but even then the two desert stages feel very apart from one another, with one of them having Egyptian style sculptures to them and the other being more of a traditional desert based level. So again, this game's expression of culture as well. There's lots of Skylanders and lots of levels that are tailored towards certain cultures to ultimately make Quartermasters from around the world feel included and represented through the art of this game and what it brings to the table. So it's inclusion, not its immersion. Immersion and inclusion are two completely different things, but its inclusion is great, and it's what makes the level design so phenomenal. And on top of that, the levels are fun because there's constant variety within what you have to do. There's Rainfish Riviera, where you have to use a claw to throw pirates off a ledge, and then there's Monster Marsh, where of course you need to follow the fairy in order to avoid taking damage from a swamp, which encourages patience. It's all very well designed to create something that's fast paced and that has a great blend of combat, platforming, vehicle driving, like the Sky Highlands, which gives you, an epic open spaced area for you to gun down pirates in a little auto gyro from Giants, which is a great callback. Like, Trap Team has some great fan service in it. And so overall, Trap Team has some incredible levels, which are great for the level design because they're of the perfect length, so they never feel like they get dragged on or tedious, and therefore it's what makes Trap Team so much fun and my favourite game. I love these levels, and therefore what Trap Team does best is the level design. I wouldn't love them so much if it weren't for how amazing the design was all the same. And moving on to Superchargers, without further ado, this is where I was originally going to give Superchargers for best music in the entirety of the franchise, but after having listened to Giants some more, Giants got that crown because instead I'm giving Superchargers the greatest story of any Skylanders game, because Skylanders games don't really have a focus on story and they don't really have much tone or style to them neither. Anyone could direct a Skylanders game, However, Superchargers, on the other hand, is the direct juxtaposition to the idea that Skylanders games have simple stories, because Superchargers takes advantage of every tool set up by previous Skylanders games to make for a thoroughly engaging and compelling story. As with Superchargers, it has a really dark and consistent tone, because it has a Star Wars type vibe to it. With Chaos having won at the beginning of the game, he has managed to untether the connection between our world and Skylanders by untethering the portal, in other words.
So long, poser master. Forever!
But luckily, this is where Rift engines come in. Inside every vehicle, like the Hot Streak right here, is a Rift engine capable of creating a portal to and fro worlds. So whenever you put this on your portal of power, it's opening up a rift into Skylands, so you don't no longer need that portal connection in order to access the world of Skylanders with your toys, who can any toy you can drive any vehicle, which is cool straight out of the bat. That's just a really interesting way to incorporate the vehicles into the story itself. And on top of that, because it is a rebellion story, because you have to start from the ground and slowly but surely build your way up, rescue Master Eon, finish the Core of Light, and then after the Core of Light is destroyed, you lose all hope, you lose your friends, in the form of Glumshanks, who initially sacrifices himself for the good of the Academy, and then later on you manage to rescue him. But still, this game has constant grip and emotion to it because of its darker tone it takes, because the Skylanders aren't in the greatest position. They don't have the same degree of hope as they normally would with Chaos, and the fact that he is winning and he is besting us and he is striking back. Again, just like Star Wars, halfway through the game, Chaos effectively strikes back as he finds the Academy and destroys the Core of Light. It gives you emotional highs and emotional lows, as well as character development on top of that. Like, Chaos actually has to contemplate his decision as to whether to follow the darkness and destroy Skylands, or whether following the darkness was a terrible plan and that he should instead help the Skylanders stop him so he can conquer Skylands for himself. If you destroy Skylands, there's nothing to be the ultimate evil overlord over, as Glumshanks put it. And overall, that is some amazing development. It's a Skylanders game. The last thing you expect to be talking about in a Skylanders game is how sophisticated and well thought through the stories, as well as the character development, and yet Superchargers offers them both to the greatest extent we've ever seen from the Skylanders franchise, which is why the follow-up to Superchargers was so disappointing on the story front. We have this amazing story, and then Imaginators has none of that. But speaking of what Imaginators does have, what Imaginators absolutely nails is the cast of playable characters. Not the NPCs, because the NPCs are kind of lame in this game. They are done far superior in Superchargers due to the development, the natural development brought about by the incredible plot and tone of the game. But with Imaginators, they have senseis, and senseis by far have some of the most fun attacks which flow together really, really well to make the senseis all really fast-paced and fun characters to play as, with all distinctive designs and movesets to basically encourage you to play each one as much as you can, because no matter which sensei you're playing as, you are guaranteed to have fun, because they're also fleshed out and thought through without a shadow of a doubt. Imaginators does get one thing right, whether you can believe it or not. Imaginators might be my least favourite game of the series, but credit where credit is due, Imaginators by far has the best cast of playable characters, with not a single sensei being bad in my opinion. Every single one has their own quirks and gameplay styles to make them all distinctive and incredibly fun to play as. Again, it's mostly due to their gameplay styles and their upgrade chambers, which are sophisticated, so you're pushing more buttons but they're comboing together much more fluently, and so the flow with their attacks and the combinations they create are visually awesome to watch unfold, and knowing that you're the one doing them is what makes them all the more fun. So naturally, Imaginators has the best cast of playable characters, and that, my friends, is what every game does best. So as a quick little recap, Spyro's Adventure has the best interactivity, Giants has the best music, Swap Force has the best content, Trap Team has the best level design, Superchargers has the best story, and Imaginators has the best cast of playable characters. But go on ahead and let me know in the comment section below how wrong I am. And with that being said, I sure hope you guys enjoyed the video. I definitely enjoyed talking to you guys about this for 20 minutes straight. I've really allowed my passion to show through in this video because I love this franchise, and I love it when each game gets something right, and in these cases that's exactly what they did. So with all of this coming to a natural conclusion, of course I'll be seeing you in the future for another video, but until the moment arises, peace.